What's up, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Storytime with the Anthony KT. Now, normally this is the part where I talk about what happened on last week's episode of Storytime with the Anthony KT. Talk about the chapter that I read from The Unexpected and what is the new chapter that I will be reading from The Unexpected. But for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be taking a detour with Storytime with the Anthony KT, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of a reading from both stories, both books that from both books that are and will be out on barnesandnoble.com and on amazon.com. First off, the first story that is available right now on barnesandnoble.com and on amazon.com is In the Dark the Sun Will Rise. It's a story that takes place in 1968, the same day as Martin Luther King's assassination, and takes place in Los Angeles. 6 people's lives are changed forever from what happens in the span of 24 hours. The other story, A Walk Through London, which will be available August 9th. You can pre-order now on barnesandnoble.com, but it'll be available August 9th on both barnesandnoble.com and on amazon.com. A Walk Through London, a story about an author from Santa Rosa, California, who goes through a bad breakup when he catches his girlfriend cheating on him, and ends up taking a random trip to London where he's having dinner at a restaurant called Radio Rooftop, and ends up bumping into the table of a young woman named Sophia, and in that moment his life changes forever. Yeah, so that's A Walk Through London, but that'll be next week. This week, In the Dark the Sun Will Rise. So what I'm going to be reading from you is chapter 5 from In the Dark the Sun Will Rise. And in this story, David is telling Tim, and now David is David is Tim's partner. They are a male gay white black couple. Tim is Caucasian and David is African American. And David is telling Tim the story about what happened to him, the reason why he ran away from his house many years ago, in 1955. And when we start the story off, from Connor's point of view of what happened that day, and what David is about to do is tell Tim his point of view of what happened on that day in July of 1955. Okay, we're just gonna dive right in. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'm just gonna read a little bit of it. But anyway, I'm just gonna dive right in. Sitting in the living room across from Tim was David. After the brick breaks through their window and reading what was on the note, David took a breath in and exhaled out as he prepared himself to not only tell Tim the story from his past he was hoping he would never have to tell, but preparing himself to relive something he was hoping he would never have to relive. David takes a drink of his coffee, says okay to himself, and begins the story. The year was 1955. I was 16 and living with my mom and dad and my younger sister in Jefferson, Mississippi. On the other side of Jefferson was a 17-year-old boy named Connor Mills. His father, Randy Mills, was president of the Ku Klux Klan chapter of Jefferson from his barn. It was this big red barn with white stripes and a Confederacy flag painted on both of the barn doors. My friends and I knew who Connor and his father were. Connor was the type that always had something to say, but never backed it up. They were just words to scare the shit out of us. And most days it worked. What did he say to you? Tim wanting to know. That he was going to come to my house while my family and I were asleep and cut our throats or burn us alive while we were asleep in the house. Sometimes he would threaten to hang me in front of the school, David explained. I don't even I don't even have the words for that, Tim said with shock in his voice. That's the South during the Jim Crow era. It's horrible and scary every time we left the house. But that's how it was. But that's how it was then. And I'm pretty sure that's how it still is. And I'm pretty sure that's how it is still today. Anyway, one night my friends and I had this idea of going out and get some food and just have some fun in the downtown area. So we so we waited so we waited until we waited till it was dark. We waited till it was dark enough to to head it downtown. We didn't have cars, so the only way for us to get there was to walk. But we had to cross the field where the Mills barn was. And there where the Mills barn was, and there they held their KKK meetings every night. When we were crossing the field, we were as quiet as teenagers could be. We made it across the field with no problem. Downtown, there was this black only diner that was always open where we would always hang out after school. Little Richard was on the jukebox singing Tutti Frutti. We were dancing, eating, eating burgers and fries, drinking milkshakes, just having a great time. And the night was nice with the crisp air keeping the outside cool but not cold. What I didn't know was my father had gotten a number of his friends and some of the men in the neighborhood together to pay a visit to Mr. Mills and the rest of his KKK buddies. With a snap of a finger, the music stopped, and we could hear the gunfire and the commotion from downtown. We were scared and knew we had to leave and get home as soon as we could. We all went back through the field because it was our only way home. From the field, we could see the fighting and see it was getting closer to us. We stayed quiet as we were crossing the field. I was behind them to make sure they made it across safely. As I was crossing, I tripped over something. My friends kept moving as I fell to the ground. I didn't tell them to wait. I didn't tell them to wait for me because even with all the fighting that was happening, I was scared that a KKK member would hear us. We had to remain quiet as I was on the ground. I looked to see what I tripped on, and it was Mr. Mills. He was dead from what looked like a sharp object long enough to enter from his back and go through his stomach. And there was one shot to his head. I was in complete shock and I was terrified. I had never seen a dead body before. There was so much blood all over the ground. Then I could hear footsteps walking in the tall grass, getting closer and closer to me. And then I saw him. It was Mr. Mill's son, Connor. He looked right at me with his eyes of the devil, and I got up and I ran as fast as I could. As I ran, all I could hear him shout, "On the death of my father, I will find you and I will kill you." I got home and I have never felt as scared as I was in that moment. I knew from his words this was the one time I knew he meant what he was saying. I knew if I stayed, I would be putting my family at risk. I knew he wouldn't just kill me, but kill everyone in my house. I knew I only had one choice, so I packed a bag of whatever I could fit in it, and I left my house without saying goodbye. It was in the middle of the night. My mother and sister were sound asleep, and without saying goodbye, I was leaving them behind. I didn't even know if my father was still alive. I just left. And I didn't look back. After all these years on the run and hiding from him, he has finally found me, and he is going to kill me. And that is a little something from In the Dark the Sun Will Rise. And this has been Storytime with the Anthony KT. In the Dark the Sun Will Rise is available on barnesandnoble.com and on amazon.com. The link is in the bio for it. Next week, I will be doing a reading from one of the chapters of A Walk Through London. But that'll do it for this week of Storytime with the Anthony KT. I will see y'all next time. So in the meantime and in between time, peace, y'all.